Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to go through all the books that I read in February. February was such a good month for me. Maybe not in terms of the books that I read, but I got out of my reading slump. January was so horrific, and I think going through February, I now realize how bad January really was for me in terms of reading. Yes, I read maybe the same amount or maybe more books in January, but it was such a struggle. It was a longer month. February was shorter, and I just felt like I was just in the groove. I was just in the groove. Normally I go through all the books that I read in order. I'm just going to do it in the ranking this month. I just decided to do that. So the worst book that I only read half of it, so it is a DNF, but I read half of it because I was really trying to read this book, and it is In at the Deep End by Kate Davis. I got this from Waterstones. I was in England early January. I went book shopping and I picked this up. It looked fun. I read the back of it. It looked like it was going to be a fun, 20-something-year-old trying to figure out her sex life and things, some sort of like Bridget Jones's thing. I mean, a lot of the things that I heard about it at the time was like a Bridget Jones type of book where it's supposed to be funny and whatnot. This is anything but that. It starts off like that. Probably the first few chapters, you're like, okay. But then it goes a completely different way. And it doesn't matter that it went a different way. It still wasn't done very well. So this actually ended up being a queer book. So it's about a girl who realizes that she's a lesbian, and it's her coming out story, but it's done in the worst possible way because the book is all about sex. Like the whole, it's not even just snippets of it or like funny moments about it, but it literally every single page is about her thinking about it. And it is done in the most gross way that I can imagine a book for women to read to be done that way. I just don't know anyone who would like this. And I read comments on Goodreads once I realized that I just couldn't get through this book. I got halfway through, I couldn't finish it. And I read a bunch of like lower star ratings on Goodreads, and it's all from these queer women, these lesbians, and they're like, this is not the book for us. This does not represent our community. This is horrible, because basically she ends up in this terrible relationship with this woman. I didn't get to the point where it gets really bad, but it's like BDSM and like all this like horrific stuff that I don't know, she was basically in at the deep end, and it just wasn't for me. I think I was trying to push through. I was like, maybe it'll get better, maybe it'll get better. I was trying to get there, but I got to 180, maybe the 200 mark, and it's only like a 300 and something page book, right? So I did my time and I couldn't get through it. So I gave it a 1 star. It was just really bad. Had it been done really nice in a sweet way, I like sweet romance. I think I realized I like sweet romance. This was definitely not sweet. It wasn't funny, and it just icked me out. So I gave it a 1 star, unfortunately, which is a shame, because if I'm gonna read books about, like queer community or LGBTQ+ and all that stuff, I don't want to give them bad ratings, but I don't feel bad about it because I've seen other people give it bad ratings for the same reason that I'm doing it. So it's not a me thing. Okay, moving on. I also read Things We Never Got Over. This is by Lucy Score. I have all 3 of these books, and I wish that I hadn't bought all 3. Oh, I have a thing in here. I wish I hadn't bought all 3 of these because it was real struggle to read this. I think it started off fine. I was like, okay, it's a romance. He's like grumpy. He's gonna be grumpy sunshine. They're a little bit older. She's in her 30s and he's in his 40s. So I thought, it's going to be more mature than some of the other books that I've been reading, where it's like a young 20-year-old and whatnot. And it was awful. It was awful. I think the problem I had with this was the main male character. His name is Knox. Yes, his name is Knox, and he is just kind of repulsive. I don't think there's any redeeming qualities about him other than the fact that I guess he's attractive, but he has no nice tendencies. Even the way he treats his brother, the way him and his brother treat each other is just appalling, and something that you do as a teenager, not as a 40-year-old male. And he's just he's like a big overgrown child. And when you get into his POV, he's just talking about her in the most gross sexual manner. And it's just horrible. Like, I just didn't like this at the end of the day. I gave it a 2-star, which is probably a little bit higher than what it deserves. But it just got really, really boring at the end of the day too, and I couldn't get through it. Okay, next up we have an audiobook. It's the only audiobook that I listened to this month, or actually that I finished this month, and it is Emma by Jane Austen. I gave this a 2-star. I know that this is a beloved book by many, and there are so many adaptations of the story, and maybe it's because I know the story so well that I found the book to be such a dull experience for me. You know, I'm listening to the actual full production where you've got like good actors, like, you know, reading out everything on Audible, and I just couldn't get into it. I hated it so much, and there was only a few moments that I really enjoyed, and then everything else I just didn't like at all. And I think the main problem is I don't like Emma. I don't like her as a character. And I know that she's obnoxious and she's like up herself and I'm not gonna get married and blah, blah, blah. And she also causes a little bit of trouble with the people around her because she's just a little bit of a twit. But, and it's supposed to be funny, and I didn't find the book funny at all. Like, I've seen so many adaptations of Emma that it's, you know, she's a quirky, funny character. Like Clueless is like probably the most famous one. You know, it's somewhat of a reimagining of Emma, right? And that is obviously full comedy, and it's just light and fun. And even the other ones I didn't like this. So I gave it a 2-star. I know you shouldn't really diss on the classics, but I liked some of the Jane Austens that I read last month. I really didn't like this one. So yeah, I had to read it too. Okay, next up, this one, I did technically rate it a 3 on Goodreads, but I do think it's more of a 2.5, 2.75 for me. And it is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Everybody who loves Ali Hazelwood is going to be very disappointed or click away, and that's fine. But she's just not for me. And this book, I think it was okay. It started off fine. It was young. The characters are very young and a bit silly, but I can forgive that if the way that it's written is fine and it's logical and it makes sense within a relationship and a romantic sort of atmosphere. But my biggest issue really with this book is when the two got together intimately. I just got a massive ick. I hated the way it was written. It was really just so off-putting and so unromantic, and I don't know how people are swooning over this. It just was really not my type of thing. So yeah, it wasn't even that it had spice to it, because that didn't put me off. It was like their dialogue before, during, and it was just like, ugh, I couldn't. So yeah, I liked some parts of it. I really did. And then I was like, no, this is not for me. And I think I just have to be honest with myself. So it's technically a 2.5. So yeah. Okay, next up we have A Discovery of Witches. I didn't start this in February, but I certainly finished it. And this is by Deborah Harkness. This is the first book in the All Souls trilogy. It actually has 4 books, and I've seen that a 5th book is coming out this year. I would be super excited about that had I rated this super high, but I ended up rating this a 3, like a solid 3. I don't really feel like there's anything terrible about it, but there's nothing good about it. Like, I think the best parts of this were probably the last part of it where they're talking about like the time travel. Like, that for me seemed quite interesting. But basically this is about a witch. She is academia, but it's also with witches and vampires and daemons. So if you're into all of that, then this might be up your alley. But she's a witch and she's in Oxford. She's already like, you know, a PhD, whatever. We have her PhD. She is in her 20s or late 20s, something like that. She's incredibly intelligent. But when she ends up meeting Matthew, which is the love interest, and he is the vampire, he is old, very, very old, she just becomes like a ditzy little girl. And she loses all of her independence, her personality, and she is just, it's like insta love, and I didn't like that. And there's this whole backstory where, you know, witches and vampires are rivals and are not supposed to, you know, they're never supposed to get together, and there's like a whole law about it. So they've really upset a lot of people with their romance, and they're like, well, screw it, we're gonna stay together, and so they're gonna fight against the people. And so yeah, I mean, I can see how this would be a series because there is quite a lot that needs to be happen. And there's a lot of references to the fact that this is like an adult version of Twilight, which at first I couldn't see, but I can definitely understand why people say that. So yeah, I gave it a 3. I just thought that the book itself was too long. I think if it was a little bit more compact and we didn't have so many filler scenes and chapters where nothing really happens, I would have enjoyed it more. Also, if the stakes were a little bit higher, I would have enjoyed it more. I just thought it was a little too fluffy, a little too goody two-shoes, and just like the insta-love I didn't really care for. And yeah, it didn't grab me. I do have 3 other books because I bought the whole set, which is stupid of me because I thought I would really like this. And I will eventually, I think, read them, but yeah, big disappointment. Okay, next up is another Ali Hazelwood book. I gave this a 3-star. I think I didn't enjoy it very much. It's a low 3-star, but I did enjoy it more than The Love Hypothesis. So this is Love Theoretically. And this one, I think I enjoyed it more because I think I liked the male character a little bit more in this one, and I felt it just built up a little bit better, but I still ended up getting the ick, I have to say, when they actually do end up getting together. Personally for me, the way that Ali Hazelwood writes her romance scenes and her intimate scenes is just not for me. It just gives me a secondhand embarrassment, and it's not romantic in my eyes, and that's a me thing. And I completely understand it. It might be because I'm not I'm not a 20-year-old anymore, so maybe they're just too young for me, but it's just not for me. It's not my cup of tea. I do feel like this one was a little bit dull. Like, thinking about it now, I can barely remember really what happens. She uses an app where she fake dates people, and she's fake dating his brother, and she doesn't realize that he is a PhD professor or whatever, and so they meet professionally, and then he knows that she's been lying about who she is, and blah, blah, blah. And it just takes forever for them to, like, spill the beans about what's really going on and stuff. I don't know, I just thought the premise was kind of silly, but that didn't put me off the book. It was really just, it's always the romance. The romance just throws me off, and I didn't care for it, so. Okay, the rest of these books I did enjoy, so I think the rest of this will be good. So this was a shot in the dark. I didn't expect to like this, but I did read A Fragile Enchantment by Alison Saft. This one I think we got in Fairy Loot or Illumicrate. I think it was one of those. It's such a beautiful looking book. It is YA, so I thought, okay, well, let me read it. I was reading a lot of romance. It was during my Valentine's Day vlog, and I was trying to read romances for the week, and this one was such a pleasure to read. I really enjoyed it. So basically, she can weave her magic into clothing. She's, I guess, a fashion designer, if you want to, like a modern day fashion designer, but she's an embroiderer, and she creates the wedding clothing for him and his bride-to-be for their wedding, blah, blah, blah. And he's the prince, and there's a lot of like political stuff in this book. I can see there being or there could have been a second book. I think this is just a standalone, but I could see this being developed into a series. I do think it has the potential for it. And I did like their love story. I thought it was really sweet. I gave this a 4-star. It was, and I think I'm rating it a little bit higher because it is YA, and it was just very sweet. I liked the way it was done. It was a slow build between the two. They were like, not enemies to lovers, but they didn't like he was really mean and cold, and like it was Grumpy Sunshine again, right? But done in a nice way, because he's not an arrogant, horrible, mean person. Like, he actually has reason to be the way he is, and she just misinterprets his actions. So there's a little miscommunication there, but I like the way it was done, and I like the magic system. I thought it was interesting. He can also weave, not weave, but he can control like nature and vines, and when he gets overpowered, he is quite destructive. That wasn't explained to its fullest, and I would have liked to know a little bit more about how that works. But yeah, there's a lot of political stuff because obviously his brother is like the king, and there's a lot of drama surrounding things like that. So it was all Regency. It's just nice. It was a nice, easy read, and it was something that I needed at the time, so I rated it quite high. Okay, next up I read From Lukov with Love. This is from Mariana Zapata, so my second Mariana Zapata book. The last one I rated it like a 3 or 3.5. This one I'm rating it a 4. I think it was good. I really did enjoy it. This one is a very slow burn, like real slow burn. It's also a really long book. I mean, I think for a romance it's really long. It's like 460 pages or something like that. So, you know, if you're not like willing to invest in the relationship and the story dynamic of the two characters, then I can understand why people would probably DNF this book or find it a little bit boring. For me personally, I actually really liked it. Maybe I like slow burn, but I did like, it's about an ice skater and she is down on her luck. She's just, her partner left, like her ice skating partner left her a year ago, and she's like figuring out if she's gonna retire or not. You know, she's a really good skater, but she's never won any tournaments or championships or anything. And Lukov is the world champion, and he ends up asking her to be his partner for reasons she doesn't really quite understand. But we later find out why, and it's, you know, it's quite sweet and everything like that. So I think in general their romance was very nicely done. There's hardly any spice in this. Literally there's like only one scene and that's it. So it's not a spicy book by any means. It is just, I liked the story. I liked her and her family and the history of that, and just the ice skating in general. And I think just the slow build of their relationship, because not really much happens. Obviously they work together, they train, they get closer and whatnot, but it's just nothing. It's not like an out of this world unique story at all, but I really personally enjoyed it. So I gave it a 4. Okay, the next 3 are the last books that I read in February, and I feel like they're the best books that I read in February. So we're ending on a high. So this next one is a horror book. I read the, what is this called? The Night House by Jo Nesbø. This is translated. I didn't realize that, you know, I should have known, the author's name. I should have realized, but this is actually a translated book. So who knows if the original was even better. I've seen some people like this and some people don't like this. I like this. This is a very short book. It's like only 200 and something pages, because a lot of what's in here is like the first snippet of the next book that he has. But I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. There's 3 different parts. I gave it a 4-star. It would have been a 5-star had I not been slightly disappointed in the last part, because I really enjoyed part 1, which is you follow this 14-year-old boy and he sees his friend get swallowed up by a telephone. Not a spoiler because it's in the back of the book. And please don't believe him, obviously. And then some like more weird things happen after that. So we follow him there, and then there's part 2 and part 3 of kind of what happens with the story, and they're like 3 different layers of the story. So I actually really enjoyed it. I spoke about it in my video where I'm trying to find a 5-star read. It wasn't a 5-star, but it was a 4-star, and I was really pleased about it. I did actually go look and see what other books he had. There's a lot of people referencing the Harry Hole crime novels. He's got like 13 of them. I don't know if they're really my cup of tea. This is definitely a little bit different. I think the reason I liked the first part of it was quite camp horror, like campy and really, really fun and really gory. And I was just in the mood to read things like that. And you don't really take it seriously because you're like, what is going on? Like, it was just fun. So yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed it. So yeah, gave that a 4-star. And then the next 2 are 5 stars. And I am so pleased. I read some 5 stars this month. I haven't had a 5-star since November, so I was definitely due one. So this next one was a surprise to me. Absolute surprise. The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker. I picked it, my TBR jar picked it from my shelves one day, and I read it, and I even like the first 40 pages, like, oh, this is interesting, this is fun, but I did not expect it to be a 5-star. And then I was like, this is a 5-star. After getting through it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so much fun. Again, this is a really, really fun book. So this is YA, which I don't think I really love YA, but I've given 2 YA books higher ratings, so maybe I do, I don't know. But this was YA. It's set in China. It's set in like 775 China, so a long time ago. It is kind of a historical romantic-y fantasy fiction, right? So it's a lot of fun. She trains to be a royal alchemist, and she ends up obviously becoming one. And then she realizes there's some weird shit going down in the palace and the empress and all that. And there's a little bit of romance with the prince, but it's not the forefront of the story, which I think that's probably why I liked it so much. There's a lot of monsters, and the thing that I loved most about this is because the brutality of it. It's so gruesome. There's blood everywhere. There's dismembering parts of bodies and stuff, and I didn't expect that in a YA novel. So yeah, I was super pleased because it doesn't sugarcoat anything. A lot of death, and yeah, tons of blood and gory descriptions. And I liked it. It was kind of fun. It was fun. So I would definitely, it's not a horror, but it has horror elements to it. So I just thought that was so much fun and really, really enjoyed it. And there's also like a trial as well. So she has to go through 3 different tests to become a royal alchemist, and they're quite brutal tests. So, you know, if you like all of these different tropes in books, you might like this. It's all about like bringing people back from the dead, you know, and it's just good. It's good. It's fun. So anyway, really enjoyed that. I gave it 5 stars. It was a huge surprise for me. That was the biggest surprise of the month. This next one, this is a book that I've been I started reading back in November, and then I basically soft DNF'd it for like 3 months, and I was like, I don't really feel like reading this for some reason. I got to like 70 pages and I was like, this is a cute story, but then I never picked it back up, and it is House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I ended up finishing it this month and I gave it 5 stars. How could I not? This had me weeping. I was crying. I did not expect it. Now, I personally did not think we needed a romance, but I thought the romance was really sweet. But that is not what captured me in this book. It was like the family aspect of him finding himself, finding his family, feeling like he finally belongs somewhere. I'm getting goosebumps. I thought this was the sweetest story. And honestly, I don't really like reading about kids really that much. At least I don't think so. And so that I was a little bit concerned that he basically goes to an orphanage and he's trying to determine if, you know, the orphanage should still be run, if anything weird is going on. And obviously this is all magical, so the Antichrist is there as a small boy, and it's a lot of fun. Like, there's a lot of fun. There's like a little gnome that is like this cutest, spunkiest little character I've ever seen in a book. Oh my gosh, she's so hilarious. She has these little one-liners about burying him in the garden because she loves her garden. Like, there's so many little cute things. This is such a cozy read, and I think I wasn't in the mood to read cozy, and I'm so glad I didn't like DNF it completely, and then I came back to it when I actually felt I was out of my reading slump. I felt like I could actually really enjoy it, and I was weeping. This is absolutely a 5 star. Anyway, that is everything that I read in February. Feeling so good about majority of these. I mean, I feel like half of the books that I read I really, really enjoyed, and then the others, you know, I'm trying to still figure out what I like, and maybe I just don't like these TikTok romances that everyone goes on about. There is one book that I did try to read and get through this month, but I had to DNF it. It is kind of a soft DNF because I potentially might go back to it, but I think at the end of the day, I probably have to be honest with myself. And so I tried reading The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verhees. I haven't rated it, but I got to probably about 30% of the book. It is a really long book, and it's a very long Audible book. Oh my goodness. And so there are parts of the story that I really liked. Like the first part, you follow different generations, and it's all to do with water and like how water has brought sadness and destruction to this family's life in different ways. So the part 1 was super sad and poignant, and then as soon as that happened, we go to like a different timeline, and I was just so thrown off, and I didn't really enjoy that. Also, I think the problem is, so the author narrates the Audible version, right? And he has a very thick Irish accent in my mind. So when he's doing just his normal speaking, I can hear him out, but then he tries to do like an Indian accent when he's doing some of the dialogue, And can you imagine an Irish man doing an Indian accent and trying to listen to that? It was so hard to understand what was going on. I don't think it should have been done that way. So maybe the big issue is because I'm listening to it as opposed to reading it. So maybe I eventually will just pick up the book and start reading it. It's a really long book, but you know, it was up for the Good Choice Awards for historical fiction. And it did have me crying at some point. So I'm not saying that I won't read this ever. I just couldn't read it this month. So long discussion there, but anyway. Thank you so much for watching if you got this far. Let me know if you have read any of these, what your thoughts are. If you have any horror recommendations, I would absolutely love to hear them now that I'm kind of feeling like maybe that's my jam. I don't know, but I'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.